Hello, everyone. I am the Storyteller, and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Now, get comfortable and relax. I moved into a new home a few months ago. It's an old but charming house in a quiet town. It felt perfect, a fresh start away from the noise of the city. The house had an old world charm to it, with creaky wooden floors, high ceilings, and an intricate design. I couldn't have asked for a better place to settle down. The first night, everything seemed normal. I went to bed, excited about the change, and fell into a deep sleep. But then, in the middle of the night, I woke up to something strange. Whispers. I thought it was the wind at first, rustling through the trees outside or the house settling. It's an old place, after all. It creaks and groans at night. I tried to dismiss it and went back to sleep. But then I heard it again. Soft, almost inaudible whispers. They seemed to come from the walls. I sat up in bed, straining my ears. The room was silent, except for the sound of my own breathing. But the whispers didn't stop. They continued, faint but unmistakable. I got up, walking to the walls, pressing my ear to them, trying to find the source. But there was nothing. No draft, no pipes, nothing that could explain the sound. I tried to push the feeling away, telling myself it was nothing, just the house making its usual noises. The next few nights, though, the whispers returned. They were persistent, always there when the lights were off, and the house was quiet. I started to question my sanity. Was I hearing things? Was the house really that old, or was something else at play? One evening, after another restless night, I decided to check the attic. Maybe I'd find an explanation for the strange sounds. I climbed the creaky stairs to the attic, the air thick with dust and age. The door opened with a groan, and I stepped inside, only to find the space filled with old boxes and forgotten memories. There was nothing there to suggest anything unusual. But then I felt it. A cold draft swept across my face, and for a brief moment I heard something again. A whisper, so faint I could hardly catch it. I turned, expecting to see someone or something behind me, but the attic was empty. The whispering continued. It wasn't just at night anymore. During the day, when I was in the kitchen or sitting in the living room, I would hear it, soft and constant. It was always there, lurking in the background like a presence in the room. I decided to investigate the house's history, hoping to find something that would explain what was happening. After hours of searching through old records, I found something unsettling. The house had been built in the early 1900s, but there was a long gap in its history, a gap where no one had lived there. The previous owners had left abruptly. There were no records of why they had moved out, just that they had disappeared without a trace. Some said they had left in a hurry, but no one really knew why. As I dug deeper, I found more rumors. Some said that the house was cursed, that the land it stood on had a dark history, with past owners experiencing strange, inexplicable events, just like I had. There were whispers about a man named Thomas Hawthorne, the house's original owner. He was said to have lived alone, never married, and kept to himself. One day, he simply vanished. People claimed to have heard strange noises coming from the house in the months leading up to his disappearance, but no one could explain it. The whispers, the strange happenings. It all seemed to tie back to him. I tried to dismiss the idea, telling myself it was just a coincidence, but the house had other plans. The whispers grew louder. They weren't just coming from the walls anymore. They were in the air, all around me. They followed me from room to room. I began to feel like I wasn't alone. I could sense something watching me, always just out of sight. But when I turned to look, there was no one there. The house was becoming more than just a place to live. It was turning into something else, something that I couldn't escape. One night I sat in the living room, trying to ignore the growing sense of dread. The whispers had turned into soft, incomprehensible voices, and the shadows seemed to move with a life of their own. I looked up from my book, and there, in the doorway, was a figure. A tall, thin man, standing perfectly still, watching me. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I tried to speak, but no words came out. The figure didn't move, just stared at me with empty eyes. Then, without a sound, he vanished. I rushed to the door, throwing it open to find the hallway empty. No sign of the figure, just the usual silence of the house, but it wasn't normal. I felt the air grow colder, the whispers becoming louder, almost frantic. It was as if the house itself was alive, reacting to my fear. I ran out of the house, my mind spinning, trying to process everything that had happened. But no matter how far I went, the whispers followed me. The next few days, I couldn't escape the feeling that the house was still with me. The whispers were in my dreams, in the air I breathed, in every corner of my mind. It was then that I realized there was no escaping. The house had a hold on me, and I was never going to be free. Everywhere I went, I could hear it, those whispers, always calling my name. And so I did the only thing I could think of. I left. Left the house, left the town, left everything behind. But as I looked back one last time, standing in the distance, I saw something. A figure, standing in the window, watching me as I walked away. I turned, and I knew deep down that no matter where I went, those whispers would follow. Because the house had a way of keeping its hold, and it was never going to let me go. I try to convince myself that it's just the house settling, but one night I clearly hear someone speaking. At first it's soft, just a faint murmur in the distance. It's odd, unsettling, but I dismiss it as nothing more than the house creaking in the night. After all, the house is old and it has its own sounds. The pipes groan, the floorboards creak. I've gotten used to the way the house seems to breathe around me. But this is different. The whispers come again, this time more distinct, as if someone is speaking through the walls. I lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself that I'm just hearing things. But then, I hear it again. The words are muffled, barely audible, but it's unmistakable. Someone is speaking in a language I don't recognize, and it's the same phrase repeating over and over again. My heart races in my chest. I sit up, my breathing shallow as I listen harder, straining to make out the words. It's almost as if someone is right outside my door, talking to me, trying to get my attention. I tell myself it's nothing, just the wind or the house's natural sounds. But my curiosity gets the best of me, and I decide to investigate. I get up and walk toward the wall where the sound seems to be coming from. My hand shakes as I reach out and press it against the cold surface. I listen carefully, trying to understand the words. I can't make out what they're saying, but then something happens. The voice, the voice says my name. Your name. My heart stops. I pull my hand away from the wall, stumbling back in shock. The blood drains from my face as I look around the room, my mind racing. Who's in my house? I don't want to believe it, but I can't ignore what I just heard. It's my name, clear as day, echoing in the silence of my room. It's impossible, yet here I am, trembling with fear. I slowly step back, my breath coming faster, as if the air in the room has thickened with a presence I can't see. My eyes dart to the door, to the window, looking for some escape, but I can't tear myself away from the wall. Then, just as I turn to leave, something catches my eye. It's the wall, the surface of it. It's moving. The wallpaper, which had been smooth and undisturbed only seconds ago, is rippling as if something or someone inside is trying to push through. I freeze, unable to move, my mind struggling to comprehend what I'm seeing. It's not just a minor shift in the wall. It's as if the wall itself is alive, breathing, shifting, reacting to my presence. I watch in horror as the slight indentation grows, the wallpaper bulging outward in unnatural waves. The air around me feels heavier, as if the very room is closing in on me. I can't tear my eyes away. I want to scream, but the fear chokes the words in my throat. What is happening? The whispers return, louder this time, more urgent. They swirl around me, surrounding me, as if they're coming from inside the walls, from inside the house itself. I step back, almost tripping over my own feet. I want to run, but something keeps me rooted to the spot. My mind is racing with questions. Why is this happening? What's inside the wall? Who or what is trying to get out? And then I hear it again. A voice, clearer this time, speaking my name once more. Your name. It's no longer muffled. It's clear, unmistakable, as if someone is standing right behind me, whispering it into my ear. My body goes cold, and I whip around, but there's no one there. Just the empty room. Just the dark shadows dancing on the walls. I stumble back toward the door, trying to escape, but the air feels thick, suffocating. The walls, the room, everything seems to be closing in on me. I can feel the pressure, like the house itself is alive, watching me, waiting for something. The whispers continue, relentless, echoing in my mind. I feel my heartbeat pounding in my ears as I look back at the wall. The bulging, undulating surface has stopped moving, but the fear doesn't subside. It only grows. I need to get out of here. I rush to the door, my hands trembling as I fumble with the handle. The whispers don't stop. They follow me as I flee the room, racing down the hallway. But no matter where I go, I can still hear them. Faintly at first, but growing louder and louder as I run through the house. I don't stop until I'm outside, gasping for air, my body shaking. But even then, I feel it. The house. It's still watching me. The whispers are still there, lingering in the air in the back of my mind. I don't know what to make of it. All I know is that something inside that house is trying to reach me, trying to pull me back in. The walls are alive with something dark, something I can't understand. And as I stand there, trembling in the cold night air, I realize something that sends a chill down my spine. The whispers haven't stopped. They're still there, still calling my name. I spend the following day in a daze. I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched, even though I'm far away from the house. The whispers follow me wherever I go, echoing faintly in my mind, haunting my thoughts. I try to focus on other things to push the fear away, but every time I close my eyes, I hear them again. Soft at first, but growing louder with every passing second. The walls have become a part of me. They're in my mind, crawling behind my eyelids, twisting the world into something dark and oppressive. I try to tell myself that it's just my imagination, but deep down, I know better. There's something in that house, something ancient and twisted, and it's not done with me yet. I can feel it waiting, watching me from afar. It's in the very air, in every creak of the floor, every whisper of the wind. The house is alive, and it will never let me go. I don't know what's worse, the fact that the house is calling me back, or the fact that I'm starting to feel drawn to it. My feet want to take me there, even though my mind screams for me to stay away. The walls, the whispers, the name, it's all connected. And somehow I know that the only way to truly escape is to uncover what's hidden inside those walls. What is it that the house wants from me? What is it that it's waiting for? I don't have the answers. All I have is fear. The fear that never seems to leave. It follows me, just like the whispers. The house hasn't let go, and I don't think it ever will. The morning light filters through the curtains, casting long shadows on the floor. I barely slept last night. The whispers in the walls have burrowed into my mind, repeating over and over, making my skin crawl. I tell myself I imagined it. Maybe it was just the pipes, the wind, an overactive imagination. But deep down, I know that's a lie. I heard something, and it knew my name. The contractor's visit. By noon, I've convinced myself I need answers. I grab my phone and call a local contractor. His name is Raymond, and when he shows up at my house a few hours later, he looks like he's been working this job for a lifetime. Rough hands, sun-creased skin, and a cigarette dangling from his lips. You said you heard something behind the wall? He asks, running his fingers along the faded wallpaper. I nod. Yeah, whispering and knocking. Raymond chuckles, shaking his head. Old houses settle, creak, groan, and moan all night. I'll take a look, but I can guarantee there's nothing back there but wood and insulation. He starts tapping along the wall, listening carefully. A few knocks, a few presses. His expression is neutral until his knuckles thud against a section near the corner. His hand lingers there. This part feels off, he mutters. He knocks again. Hollow. I swallow hard. What do you mean? He shrugs. Might just be old framing. I can open it up if you want. Check what's inside. I should have said yes. I should have let him cut the wall open right there. Instead, I shake my head. No, it's fine. Just wanted to be sure there wasn't. I stop myself before I say something ridiculous. A person? A presence? A voice? Raymond nods. Well, nothing dangerous behind there, but if you hear it again, let me know. He leaves, and I lock the door behind him. My house feels different now, like the walls themselves are listening. The forgotten history. That night, I sit at my kitchen table with my laptop open, searching for anything about this house's past. It takes hours, but eventually I find something. A name. Jonathan Hale. 50 years ago, Jonathan Hale lived in this house, a quiet, unassuming man. No family, no wife, no children. One day he simply vanished. No signs of forced entry, no signs of a struggle, just gone. The police searched for weeks but found nothing. No leads, no answers, just a missing man and an empty house. I lean back in my chair, staring at the screen. My heart is pounding. Jonathan Hale lived here, and now so do I. Knocks in the night. That night, I lie awake, listening. I don't know what I expect. Maybe silence. Maybe the house proving me wrong. Then, a sound. 3 slow knocks. Knock, knock, knock. I sit up, my breath catching in my throat. It's coming from the wall, the same hollow section Raymond pointed out. I swing my legs over the bed and step onto the cold wooden floor. My heart pounds as I creep closer. My hand trembles as I reach out, and I knock back. 3 times, a moment of silence. Then, knock, knock. My stomach twists. I take a step back, shaking my head. No, no, this can't be real. I grab my phone and turn on the flashlight, aiming it at the wall. The wallpaper looks off, like it's slightly warped, bulging in some places, like something underneath it is shifting. I force myself to take a deep breath. Who's there? I whisper. No answer. But as I stand there, frozen in fear, I swear I hear something else. A voice. Soft. Muffled. And it's saying my name. The decision to break the wall. I don't sleep. I can't. The next morning, I stand in front of the wall with a crowbar in my hands. I hesitate for only a moment before I swing. The crack of breaking plaster echoes through the empty house. Dust fills the air as I tear into the wall, ripping away layers of old wallpaper and wood. I expect insulation, wooden beams, an empty cavity. What I find instead makes my blood run cold. A hidden room. It's small, barely big enough for a person to stand in. The walls are covered in faded, peeling wallpaper, but the worst part, there's something inside. A chair. And on that chair, there's a suit hanging neatly, covered in dust, old, outdated. A man's suit. And on the wall behind the chair, scratches. Long, deep, desperate claw marks. Like someone had been trapped in there. Like someone had been trying to get out. My breath is shallow as I step inside. The air is thick, heavy, suffocating. I reach out, brushing the fabric of the suit. A cloud of dust rises. A photo tucked into the folds of the suit's pocket. I pull it out with shaking hands. It's old, faded, the edges curling with age, a black and white photograph of a man sitting in the same chair. His face is blurred, indistinct. But then my stomach twists into a knot because there's something else in the photograph, something standing right behind him. A shadowy figure just barely visible in the corner of the frame. Watching, waiting. I drop the photo, my hands are ice cold, my breath comes in short gasps. That's when I hear it, a whisper right behind me. You shouldn't have opened the wall. The walls are alive. I spin around. The room is empty, but the air feels wrong, heavier, darker. And then I hear it, a soft, scratching sound. It's coming from inside the walls. Not just this room, everywhere. The entire house is alive with whispers, soft and insidious, seeping through the walls like voices buried just beneath the surface. I stagger back. The room feels smaller. The walls feel closer. The scratches behind the wallpaper are multiplying. Something is in the walls, and it knows I found it. The realization. I run. I don't stop. Not when I hear footsteps behind me, not when I feel the air grow ice cold. I don't look back. I race out the front door, gasping for breath, collapsing onto the front porch. Silence. The whispers are gone. I sit there for what feels like hours, my heart hammering in my chest. When I finally gather enough courage to look back at the house, everything appears normal. No voices, no movement. Just an old house sitting in the morning light. But I know the truth now. This house isn't haunted in the way I thought. It's not a ghost. It's the house itself. And it's been waiting for me. The hammer feels heavier in my hand as I stand before the wall. There's no turning back now. I've been pacing for hours, restless with the knowledge that something is hidden behind the drywall. The knocks, the whispers, the strange presence, everything is building up to this moment. My mind is a whirlwind of confusion, fear, and an overwhelming curiosity that I can't shake. I raise the hammer and bring it down with a force that shatters the old plaster. The first strike is solid, but the second feels wrong, like I've hit something soft. The drywall cracks open, and with it, a gust of cold air rushes out of the hole, hitting my face like a slap. I take a step back, gasping. It's not just cold, it's unnaturally cold, like the air hasn't been disturbed in decades. I stand there, frozen in place, my breath visible in the chill. I shine my phone's flashlight into the hole and immediately wish I hadn't. The light illuminates something that shouldn't be there, a hidden room. I can't breathe. My pulse is racing. My hands shake as I push the remaining drywall away. The hole opens wider, and I peer inside, my heart hammering in my chest. The room is small, claustrophobic. Inside, there's an old grandfather clock standing silently in the corner, its face dark and tarnished with age. A dusty wooden chair sits next to it, placed awkwardly as if someone had left it hastily. And in the far corner of the room, barely visible in the dim light, is a locked trunk. A sense of dread settles over me. This isn't just some forgotten room. It's wrong. The atmosphere is thick, almost oppressive. The air smells stale, like it hasn't been disturbed in years. I hesitate at the edge, but my curiosity is stronger than my fear. I step inside, and the cold seems to follow me, wrapping around me like a tangible thing. I walk toward the trunk first. It's made of heavy, dark wood, the kind that looks too old to belong in this house. There's a lock on it, rusted with time, but it's not locked anymore. The latch opens with a soft creak. My hands are trembling as I lift the lid. Inside, the trunk is full of old, tattered clothes, dark, heavy fabrics that look out of place in a room so forgotten. But it's the diary at the top that catches my attention. I pull it out cautiously. The leather cover is cracked and worn, the edges frayed with age. The pages inside are yellowed and fragile, and as I flip through them, they crackle under my fingers. The handwriting is scrawled in hurried, frantic strokes, the words barely legible. But it's the last page that makes my blood run cold. The ink on the final entry is dark, but it's not ink at all. It's dried blood. The words are jagged and distorted, as though the writer had barely been able to hold the pen. Let me out. A chill runs through my body. I drop the diary in shock and it falls to the floor with a soft thud. The room feels different now. heavier, colder. The air seems to cling to my skin. Suddenly, the temperature drops even further, and I feel it. A cold hand on my shoulder. I spin around, but there's no one there. My breath comes in ragged gasps as I stumble backward, the room spinning around me. The cold isn't just in the air anymore. It's on my skin, inside me, like I've become part of the frozen room itself. I don't know how much time passes as I stand there, shaking, staring at the trunk and the room around me. It's like time itself's frozen. The silence is deafening. The only sound is the pounding of my heart in my ears. But then the whispers start again. Soft, barely audible at first, like a distant murmur. But then they grow louder, clearer, until they fill the room. I can't understand the words, but I feel them. I feel their weight on me, pushing against my chest, forcing me to listen. The whispers aren't just in the room anymore, they're in my head. Let me out. The words are there again, clearer now, and they send a shiver down my spine. I glance toward the grandfather clock, and for the first time I notice something strange. The hands of the clock aren't moving, they're still. And then they shift. Ever so slowly, the hands on the clock creep forward. I freeze. It's like the clock is alive, slowly counting down. Counting down to what, though? The whispers are getting louder, swirling around me like a storm. I can't hear my own thoughts anymore. My mind is a blur of fear and confusion. The cold is unbearable now, and the air feels like it's pressing in from all sides. Let me out. The voice is closer now, right behind me. I can feel it, the weight of it. But when I turn around, there's nothing there, except for the chair. I don't know why, but my feet move toward it, and as I get closer, I notice something strange. The chair is no longer empty. There's someone sitting in it, but they're not moving. They're just sitting there, facing the wall, completely still. I can barely breathe as I step closer. My hand reaches out, but I don't know what I'm hoping for. I don't want to touch them, but I can't look away. The figure in the chair slowly turns its head. I gasp, stumbling backward. It's not a person at all. It's a shadow. A dark, dark figure. The face is just a hollow void. No features, no eyes, just a blackness that consumes everything around it. I back away, my feet slipping on the cold floor. The whispers rise to a crescendo, and the cold grips me, pulling me into the darkness. My hand touches the trunk, and I yank it open. I need something, anything to escape. But when I look inside, it's empty. The diary is gone, the clothes are gone, the room is bare. I look around frantically, but everything is changing. The walls are closing in, the grandfather clock is now silent, the air is suffocating, the whispers grow louder, angrier as they echo in my ears. Let me out! I scream, but no sound comes. My lips move, but I can't hear anything. I can't feel anything. I'm trapped in the room, in the house, and I'm not alone. 5. The horrifying truth. I stumble backward, my breath ragged and shallow. My hands shake uncontrollably, my fingers numb as I try to wipe the cold sweat from my brow. My heart is pounding in my chest, each beat a deafening reminder of how close I am to losing control. The shadow in the chair, whatever it was, still lingers in my mind, its hollow, empty face haunting my thoughts. I turn around again, expecting to see something, anything, but there's nothing. Just the room, just the silence, and the whispers, those maddening, incomprehensible whispers that fill the air around me. I'm no longer sure of what's real. The walls close in on me, and the room seems to shrink, its oppressive darkness pressing against me from all sides. I can feel my body tremble, but I force myself to take a breath and focus. Then I notice something strange. It's subtle at first, barely noticeable, but as I scan the walls, my eyes are drawn to a series of marks. They're small at first, barely visible, but as I approach the wall, they become clearer. Scratch marks. Long, jagged lines gouged into the plaster like someone or something had been trying to escape. I reach out, my fingers trembling as they brush against the marks. The texture of the wall is rough, like the surface had been clawed at for years. I can almost feel the desperation in those scratches, as if someone had been trapped here, their every attempt to break free hopelessly thwarted. I swallow hard. My throat is dry. This room, this house, is cursed. There's something in these walls, something I don't fully understand yet, but I can feel it, closing in on me. I have to leave. I need to get out of here. But my feet feel glued to the floor. I can't tear my eyes away from the scratches. They seem to be alive, as though they're reaching out for me, begging me to understand. I suddenly feel dizzy. The walls are spinning and the whispers grow louder, so loud now that it feels like they're inside my head. I clutch my head, my hands pressing against my ears, but it's no use. The whispers keep coming. Let me out. Let me out. Let me out. I stagger back, my mind unraveling with each repetition of those words. I can't escape them. And then I do the one thing I never thought I would do. I pick up the phone and dial 911. The operator's voice is distant, as if it's coming from a faraway place. 911. What's your emergency? I barely manage to speak, my words stumbling over each other as I explain what's happening. The police arrive quickly, their flashing lights illuminating the front of the house. They don't ask questions. They follow me silently as I lead them into the hidden room. The officers exchange uneasy glances as they step inside, their footsteps heavy on the cold wooden floor. They seem hesitant, unsure of what to make of the strange room I've discovered. I can barely focus on them. The room is suffocating. The air is thick, like the weight of years of sorrow and regret is pressing down on all of us. One of the officers moves toward the wall, inspecting the scratch marks closely. He mutters something under his breath, but I can't hear it over the deafening whispers. Another officer examines the grandfather clock. It's silent now, its hands frozen. He taps it gently, as though he's testing it, but there's no movement. They don't speak for a long time. The room is heavy with silence, broken only by the whispers that refuse to stop. Finally, one officer walks over to the trunk in the corner of the room. He hesitates for a moment before opening it. There's nothing inside, just emptiness. But then the officer stops. He bends down, his fingers brushing something cold against the floor. A bone. My heart skips a beat. The officer pulls back the floorboards, and as he does, something horrifies me more than anything I've seen before. Beneath the floor, buried in the rotting wood, is a human skeleton. I can't breathe. The room seems to tilt sideways as I stare at the remains of what must have been a person. The bones are old, brittle, but they're unmistakable. I feel the blood drain from my face as the realization hits me. This was someone. Someone who had been buried here. Someone who had been left to die. The officers step back, their faces pale. One of them pulls out a radio and calls for backup, his voice trembling as he reports the discovery. I don't know how long I stand there, frozen in place. The skeleton is so close to me now, as if it's watching me, its empty eyes staring through the darkness. The whispers seem to grow louder, sharper. Let me out. I don't know how I can still hear those words. They were supposed to be in the past, buried in the walls, trapped in time. But they're not. They're here, alive. As the police investigate further, forensic teams arrive. The room becomes a blur of activity, but I can't tear my eyes away from the skeleton. They begin their work, carefully unearthing the bones, documenting the scene, but my mind is elsewhere. I can't think straight. And then it happens. A forensic specialist approaches the skeleton with a look of quiet horror. She examines it carefully, looking at the condition of the bones. Then she turns to me, her face pale. You need to hear this, she says, her voice strained. She explains that the skeleton is recent. At least it should be. It's not just an old skeleton that's been left behind for decades. No, this man, this person had been buried alive in that wall, trapped. And as the forensic report confirms, he had died slowly, his body deteriorating over time, but his screams were never heard. My stomach turns. I can feel the bile rising in my throat. The thought that someone had been buried alive, suffocated in the walls of this very house, makes my entire body tremble. But there's more. The whispers, they were not just voices. They were his final pleas. The man had been alive as he was sealed inside the wall. His bones may be cold now, but I can't escape the feeling that he's still here. That his soul, his tortured, broken soul, is still trapped within these walls. The forensic specialist finishes her report, and the officer who'd been with me earlier turns to face me. He doesn't say anything, just looks at me with a strange, haunted expression. I realize too late that this house is no longer mine. It never was, and now the whispers will never stop. This chapter, 1,000 words in total, uncovers the horrifying truth behind the skeleton and the whispers, deepening the story's mystery and tension. I thought I was free. After the police left, after the media stopped hounding me for interviews, after the reporters and forensic teams had come and gone, I thought I could finally breathe again. The house, once suffocating and full of secrets, felt quieter. The whispers that had plagued my every waking hour, that had followed me through the darkened rooms and endless hallways, had finally ceased. I found peace. It was something I had never expected. The constant tension in my shoulders, the fear that had gripped my heart day and night, all of it evaporated like a morning mist. I thought the worst was over. The skeleton, the whispers, the tortured soul trapped in the walls, they were no longer my problem. I could sleep again. For the first time in months, I slept soundly. There were no more nights spent with my eyes wide open, staring into the darkness, wondering when the next strange sound would echo through the house. The silence that had once been unbearable had transformed into a soothing balm, lulling me into a sense of safety I had longed for. But as I lay in bed one night, finally beginning to relax, I felt it. A chill that crawled down my spine, prickling the back of my neck. I tried to ignore it, pulling the covers tighter around me, dismissing the nagging sensation that I was being watched. But it was there, subtle yet persistent. I turned my head, my eyes scanning the room, but nothing seemed out of place. The moonlight filtering through the window cast gentle shadows, the room bathed in an eerie calm. Yet the feeling remained. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I reminded myself that I had solved the mystery. The whispers had stopped. The ghost, the man who in those walls had been freed. There was no reason to be afraid anymore. But as I drifted into a light sleep, the air around me seemed to shift. It grew colder, and I heard something, soft at first, almost inaudible. It was a voice, distant, but undeniably familiar. You freed me, but I never left. I shot up in bed, my heart hammering in my chest. My eyes darted around the room, but there was no one there. Just the shadows, the quiet, and the chilling air. My breath quickened, and my pulse raced as I frantically searched for the source of the voice. The words echoed in my mind, repeating over and over like a broken record. The voice wasn't just a sound, it was a presence. A familiar presence that seemed to wrap itself around me, filling the room, suffocating me with its intensity. I slowly swung my legs off the bed and stood up, my legs unsteady beneath me. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, but my feet felt glued to the floor. I had to know what was happening. I had to understand. I walked toward the wall where the scratches had been, the ones that had haunted me since I first discovered the hidden room. The place where I had found the skeleton, the man who had been trapped in the wall. the place where I had thought I had finally uncovered the truth. As I reached the wall, I froze. Something was different. The air felt heavier here, colder. The whispers seemed to grow louder, filling my ears with their incessant murmurs. And then I saw it. Fresh blood, bright crimson, dripped down the wall, pooling at the base. I gasped, stumbling backward as the sight registered in my mind. The blood wasn't just a stain. It was as though someone had scratched the message into the wall, carving it with a precision that sent a cold shiver through my body. Now it's your turn. My blood ran cold. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. The words on the wall seemed to burn into my eyes, the meaning too clear, too horrifying to ignore. The voice, the presence, it wasn't gone. It was still here, in this house, in the walls, in the very air I breathed. I reached out a trembling hand, my fingers brushing the wall. The blood felt warm against my skin, like it had been freshly smeared just moments ago. But that was impossible. The whispers had stopped. The police had taken care of everything. The man had been freed. He was gone. But as my fingers lingered on the wall, I felt it, the unmistakable sensation of something moving behind me. I spun around, heart racing, but again, there was nothing. Just the empty room, the shadows stretching across the floor, the cold, lifeless air. But I couldn't shake the feeling. It was like a weight pressing down on me, a presence that refused to leave. I stumbled back from the wall, my mind racing as I tried to make sense of what was happening. Was I losing my mind? Had I really freed the spirit, or had I done something to take its place? I turned toward the door, desperate to leave, but then I stopped. My eyes locked onto the reflection in the window, my own face pale and terrified. But in the reflection behind me, standing just out of view, was something I hadn't noticed before. A figure, a dark shape, standing in the corner just outside the reach of the light. I couldn't make out any details, but I could feel it watching me, waiting. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't move. I couldn't look away. The figure was still there, silent and still, like a shadow waiting to strike. I was frozen in place, unable to tear my eyes away from the reflection. It was like the room had shifted, like the very fabric of reality had warped around me. And then, as quickly as it had appeared, the figure was gone. The room was silent again, except for the steady beat of my own heart pounding in my ears. I slowly turned around, but the room was empty. The darkness lingered, pressing in on me from all sides, suffocating me. I couldn't escape. I could feel the weight of the presence, its cold, suffocating grip on me. I thought I had freed the spirit, but now I'm not so sure. The whispers haven't stopped. They've only grown louder, more insistent. The voice that once said, "You freed me," now whispers, "Now it's your turn." I don't know if I'll ever be free. The screen fades to black. The sound of whispers lingers in the air, soft at first, then growing louder, until it's all consuming. The camera slowly pulls back, leaving only darkness. And the question remains, did I really free the spirit, or did it take my place? I don't know what happened next. Maybe I freed him, or maybe he took my place. I try to recall the details, but everything after that moment is hazy, like a dream that slips through my fingers the moment I wake up. I remember standing there, staring at the hole in my wall, the whispers filling my head like a swarm of insects. They weren't pleading anymore. They were excited. I reached out, fingers trembling, feeling the cold air seep from the darkness. It was deeper than it should have been, far beyond the thickness of my wall. The hand that reached for me was not my own, but it felt familiar, like shaking hands with a reflection. I think I pulled him out. I think he smiled at me. And then the whispers stopped. Everything was quiet, too quiet. The air in my room felt stale, heavy. My ears rang in the silence. I turned around, expecting to see my bed, my window, the faint glow of the streetlights outside. But I didn't. There was only darkness. It wrapped around me, pressing against my skin, cold and unyielding. I reached out, but there was no wall, no floor, no ceiling, just endless, suffocating blackness. I don't remember how long I was there, minutes, hours, days, and then I heard them again, the whispers. But they weren't coming from around me anymore. They were coming from the other side, through the wall, through my wall. I pressed my ear against it, and my breath caught in my throat. Someone was in my room. I heard soft footsteps pacing the floor, the creak of my desk chair, the rustle of my blankets, then my own voice, humming, calm, content, like I had always been there, like I had never left. I wanted to scream, to pound against the walls, to beg someone, anyone, to hear me. But I knew no one would, just like he knew, just like I had ignored him. I don't know how long I've been here now, days, weeks, years. Time doesn't move the same way in the walls, but sometimes when the house is quiet, I hear people, new voices, new lives, and sometimes, just sometimes, someone listens. If you ever hear whispers in your walls, will you listen or will you ignore them, like I did? Ethan Carter wasn't just any YouTuber, he was the YouTuber, renowned for his spine-chilling horror exploration videos that kept his millions of followers on the edge of their seats. From abandoned hospitals to deserted mansions, Ethan had ventured into it all. His passion for uncovering the world's darkest secrets was matched only by his thrill-seeking nature. If there was a place known for its eerie reputation, you could bet Ethan was ready to step into the heart of it. But tonight was different. Tonight, he was about to explore a place unlike any he had dared to enter before. An abandoned asylum with a sordid past that was steeped in mystery and fear. The old asylum, once a mental hospital, was shut down after reports of unethical experiments, dark, twisted things done to the patients who had been imprisoned within its crumbling walls. The building had remained dormant ever since, untouched and left to deteriorate as whispers of its haunting legacy spread far and wide. The asylum's name had become synonymous with fear. It was the kind of place people only dared to talk about in hushed tones. Rumors of strange noises, flickering lights, and ghostly apparitions had circulated for years. No one had dared to venture inside for decades, not until now. Ethan had been planning this overnight live stream for months. With an already established reputation for pushing boundaries, this was going to be the ultimate test of his courage. He would go into the asylum alone, armed only with a few key tools: a laptop to stream, multiple cameras strategically placed throughout the asylum to capture every angle, and a flashlight to light his way through the darkness. The real kicker, however, was the chat screen that would overlay the stream, giving his audience the chance to interact with him in real time. They would be able to send messages, offer suggestions, and ask questions as he ventured into the heart of the asylum. The excitement from his audience was palpable before the stream even began. The viewers were eagerly anticipating what would unfold during the live broadcast. They had heard the rumors too, and couldn't wait to see if Ethan would encounter something truly terrifying. The atmosphere was electric as Ethan sat in the back of his van preparing his gear. He checked each piece of equipment twice to ensure everything was in working order. The familiar sense of adrenaline ran through him, but so did a slight feeling of unease. He clicked the final switch, and just like that, the live stream began. The screen blinked to life, showing Ethan's face as he gave a quick wave to the camera. All right, Ethan said, his voice calm but slightly excited. We are live. What's up, everyone? Welcome to tonight's stream. I'm Ethan Carter. And as you know, we're about to enter a place that's been abandoned for decades, the old asylum. It's got a dark, twisted history, and I'm here to uncover the truth. You all have been waiting for this for a while, so let's not waste any time. He gave the camera a confident grin, though inside, the reality of the situation was starting to sink in. He was about to step into a place filled with ghost stories, legends, and secrets that had been buried in the dark for far too long. The air in the asylum, even from a distance, felt thick with mystery, as if the building itself were holding its breath. The chat section exploded in response. Ethan, you're insane. This place is cursed. You got this, man, but seriously, be careful in there. Something's not right. I'm telling you, there's something in that asylum. You're gonna regret going inside. Despite the warnings, Ethan's excitement only grew. His heart raced as he adjusted the camera angle, showing the looming asylum in the background. It was a hulking structure, its broken windows and dilapidated exterior giving it the appearance of a creature that had once been alive but had long since withered away. The ivy that clung to the sides of the building looked like tendrils reaching out, a reminder of how long the place had been left undisturbed. Look at that place, guys, Ethan said, his voice tinged with both awe and tension. It's exactly what you think it is, creepy, abandoned, and full of history. I've heard the stories. I know what they say happened here. But tonight, we'll find out for ourselves. He took a deep breath, then grabbed his flashlight. The beam flickered to life in the dark, casting long shadows on the ground as he approached the crumbling steps of the asylum. He could hear the faint hum of his viewers' excitement as their comments continued to flood the screen. Who's ready for this? Ethan asked, stepping carefully onto the first of many cracked steps. Let's do this. Time to see what's really inside. He stepped forward, the heavy wooden doors of the asylum creaking as he pushed them open. The air inside was stale, heavy with dust and the scent of decay. The only light came from the flashlight in Ethan's hand, which illuminated the surroundings in sharp, eerie contrast. His breath seemed to catch in his throat as the doors slammed shut behind him, the sound echoing through the empty halls. Okay, we're in. Let's get a lay of the land first, Ethan said, his voice quieter now, a hint of tension creeping into it. He scanned the area with his flashlight, revealing a series of narrow hallways and dimly lit rooms filled with broken furniture, shattered glass, and remnants of the asylum's dark past. The walls were covered in peeling paint, and in the distance, the faint hum of electrical wires could be heard. He set up a few more cameras in key locations around the building, carefully placing them so his viewers could get a clear look at the asylum's interior. Once everything was in position, Ethan sat down on the floor and opened the chat screen overlay, which showed the messages from his audience in real time. They were excited, but some seemed genuinely concerned. This is insane! It looks so much worse in person, Ethan exclaimed, his voice cracking slightly as he tried to lighten the mood. You're doing great, Ethan. Keep it up, one comment read. Check the basement. That's where all the weird stuff happens. Ethan smiled nervously as he glanced down the hallway toward the staircase that led to the basement. He wasn't sure if he was ready to go down there just yet, but the idea of exploring the dark depths of the asylum was undeniably tempting. His viewers were urging him on, and the thought of what might be down there stirred both excitement and fear in him. Well, I guess that's where we're headed next, he said with a chuckle. Let's see what the basement holds. But first, let me grab a quick shot of this place for you all. He set the camera down and took a few quick pictures of the eerie surroundings, his flashlight casting long shadows that seemed to move on their own. There was an unsettling stillness to the place, as if the asylum was waiting for something to happen. The silence was broken only by the occasional rustle of wind through the broken windows and the quiet clicking of his camera. But as Ethan moved deeper into the asylum, there was a growing sense that he wasn't alone. Something was watching him. Something from the past that didn't want to be disturbed. The comments continued to flood in. Did you hear that? Ethan, turn around. Something moved. Guys, look at the shadows. They're moving by themselves. Ethan paused, listening carefully, but the only sound was his own breathing. He looked over his shoulder, the air growing cold as he moved toward the staircase. The audience's excitement was palpable, but it was clear that some of them were starting to feel uneasy. And in the back of his mind, Ethan couldn't help but feel it too. The asylum was alive in its own way, and it wasn't thrilled to have him here. But there was no turning back now. He had started this journey, and he wasn't about to back down. Not in front of his audience. Not when things were just getting interesting. Ethan's flashlight flickered as he moved deeper into the asylum's maze of dark hallways. The beam of light bounced off decaying walls, revealing peeling wallpaper and cracked, broken doors that led into rooms long forgotten. The air grew colder the further he went, thick with the stale smell of dust, mold, and something else. Something metallic, like the faint trace of rust and iron. The silence was heavy, almost oppressive. All right, guys, we're officially inside the heart of this place, Ethan said, his voice carrying a hint of excitement mixed with tension. This asylum, it was once a mental hospital, but not just any hospital. I've heard rumors about the experiments that were done here. Unethical stuff, to put it lightly. Patients, they say, were treated like lab rats. No one knows exactly what happened, but we know it wasn't pretty. The screen showed a series of narrow hallways, each one darker than the last. Ethan's footsteps echoed against the walls as he continued walking, the sound unnervingly loud in the emptiness. The only other noise was the soft whir of his cameras, which were strategically placed around the building to capture the strange events that were about to unfold. He could feel the eyes of his audience on him, even though they were hundreds of miles away. The stories are wild. People say they hear things, see things, feel things in here. There's even talk of ghosts, shadows that move on their own, and unexplained noises. Ethan continued, trying to maintain his usual confident demeanor. But hey, that's why you're all here, right? To see if there's any truth to it. Stick with me and we'll figure out what really happened. As Ethan spoke, the comments in the chat started rolling in, with many viewers sharing their thoughts, theories, and warnings. Ethan, please be careful. Something feels off. I have a bad feeling about this. You shouldn't go deeper. Check the shadows. Something's behind you. At first, Ethan dismissed the comments. His viewers had always been quick to jump to conclusions, often pointing out random noises or movements as signs of something sinister. He had dealt with these kinds of distractions before. But tonight was different. There was something about the atmosphere, something in the air, that felt undeniably strange. He paused in front of one of the asylum's many broken doors, shining his flashlight into the room beyond. The shadows stretched unnaturally, and the air in the room felt colder, almost biting. Ethan shivered slightly, brushing it off as just his imagination running wild. Okay, I'll admit it, he said with a half laugh, half nervous chuckle. This place definitely has some weird vibes, but that's all they are. Vibes. I mean, come on. We're in an abandoned asylum. It's going to be creepy. The comments continued to flood in, each one adding to the sense of unease that was beginning to creep into his own mind. Ethan, look behind you. There's something in the corner. Did you hear that? A whisper. Ethan rolled his eyes, chuckling again as he turned to address his viewers. You guys are really killing me with this. I think it's just some weird glitch or, maybe a prank. I don't know. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. You're starting to sound like one of those ghost hunting shows. But even as he said the words, he couldn't ignore the feeling that something was off. There was no logical explanation for the coldness he was feeling, or the way the shadows seemed to stretch just a little too far, as if they were trying to follow him. Still, he kept walking, pushing further into the asylum's depths. The chat continued to fill with messages, but now they were more urgent, more insistent. Ethan, seriously, look at the wall behind you. Something's moving. Bro, the door just slammed behind you. Did you hear that? Ethan froze, his breath catching in his throat. He turned quickly, aiming the flashlight at the door he had just passed. The old wooden door was still open, but there was a subtle shift in the air as if something had just brushed against it. It didn't slam, but the subtle movement was enough to make his skin crawl. He laughed it off, but the laughter didn't sound quite as confident this time. Okay, okay. That one was a little weird, I'm not gonna lie, but it's probably just the wind or something. Let's keep going. He turned back around and started walking again, but now his pace was slightly quicker. The unsettling feeling was growing, and he couldn't ignore it any longer. The building was starting to feel alive, as though it were watching him. He shook his head, trying to shake off the thought, but it stuck with him. As he turned the corner, his camera feed briefly flickered. The screen went black for a split second before it returned, but when it did, something was wrong. The image on the screen was distorted, flickering, almost as if the camera had trouble focusing. Ethan's face appeared stretched, his features warping and twisting in unnatural ways. His eyes widened in confusion as he stared at the screen, unsure of what was happening. Okay, that's definitely not normal, Ethan muttered, staring at the glitching feed. He reached up to adjust the camera, but before he could, the feed returned to normal. He looked around the room, checking the cameras he had set up, but they all seemed fine. All right, well, that was weird, he continued, brushing it off with a nervous laugh. I guess even the cameras are getting a little freaked out, but no big deal. We're just going to keep going. The chat was full of comments now, many of them expressing confusion and concern. Did anyone else see that? Bro, your face just... that wasn't normal. Something's messing with the stream. This is freaky. Ethan took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. He wasn't going to let a few glitches get to him. He had been through worse in his career. Longer streams, scarier places, and far more bizarre occurrences. This was nothing. I'm good, guys, he said, smiling into the camera. I think the signal's just dropping a bit, but that's normal for a place like this, right? I mean, this place is basically falling apart. The camera feed flickered again, but this time it lasted a little longer. For a moment, the image froze completely, and then the distorted version of Ethan's face appeared again. His eyes were unnaturally wide, the shadows around him growing darker, as if the very light from his flashlight was being swallowed by something unseen. The room around him seemed to stretch, elongating, and the walls seemed to pulse with a strange energy. For a brief moment, Ethan thought he saw something move in the corner of the frame. Something dark, something tall and hunched. But when he turned to look, there was nothing there, just the empty, decaying hallway. The glitching stopped, and the feed returned to normal. Ethan blinked, trying to process what he had just seen. His pulse quickened, but he didn't let it show. All right, he said, his voice a little shakier than before. This is just a technical issue. No big deal. Let's keep moving. You guys are just messing with me now, right? But even as he said the words, his heart wasn't so sure. The deeper he went into the asylum, the more the place seemed to push back against him. The atmosphere was thickening, the air heavier with every step. He could feel the weight of the building pressing down on him, and for the first time in a long time, Ethan wasn't sure if he wanted to go further. Still, the lure of the unknown was too strong. He wasn't about to back down now. The stream was live, and his audience was counting on him. So with a forced smile, Ethan moved deeper into the asylum, ignoring the rising fear in the pit of his stomach. There was something in the shadows, something that didn't want him there, and it was only a matter of time before it showed itself. The walls of the asylum seemed to close in as Ethan ventured further into the building. The eerie quiet had become suffocating, and the oppressive darkness seemed to stretch out, reaching for him with every step. His flashlight flickered again, briefly casting the hall into an impenetrable blackness before it came back to life, revealing the decayed surroundings once more. He had been through many haunted locations in the past, and this felt different. The air in this place was thicker, heavier, almost suffocating. Every sound felt amplified, every movement felt unnatural. But Ethan had built a reputation as the fearless horror explorer, and he wasn't about to let a few chills stop him. He needed content. He needed to keep his audience engaged. And most importantly, he needed to prove that he could handle this place, no matter how unsettling it was. This place has definitely seen better days, Ethan muttered, the light of his flashlight bouncing off the walls as he moved deeper. Just look at these rooms. Broken windows, rusted tools. It's like they just left everything behind in a hurry. It's almost like they just stopped one day, and whatever was going on here, it just ended. Ethan was standing in front of a door now, his hand gripping the rusty handle, his breath coming a little quicker than usual. The door creaked as he pushed it open, revealing what appeared to be an old experiment room. The floor was littered with broken glass, discarded papers, and what seemed to be remnants of medical equipment. A rusted metal bed frame, syringes, glass vials, and tools that had long since lost their purpose. The air in the room was thick with the scent of decay and neglect, and Ethan's heart skipped a beat as he stepped inside. "This is where it all happened," he said, his voice low and cautious. "The rumors, this room is where they supposedly did the experiments. You can just feel the bad energy in here. They say patients would be strapped to these beds, subjected to God knows what kind of procedures. It's insane. I mean, what kind of people?" A loud knock echoed from somewhere behind him, sharp and sudden, rattling his nerves. "What was that?" Ethan stammered, his head snapping around. The knock came again, this time closer. He stood frozen, flashlight clutched in his hand, eyes scanning the room. The chat was exploding, the comments flooding in faster than Ethan could keep up with. "Did you hear that? Ethan, turn around. There's someone behind you. I saw something move in the shadows." Ethan's heart hammered in his chest. He swung the flashlight around, the beam cutting through the darkness. There was nothing. Just the dilapidated room, the broken beds, the rusted tools. His pulse raced, but he laughed it off, trying to calm the growing unease in his chest. "Guys, come on. It's just the building settling. Old buildings make noise. You know that." But his voice lacked the usual conviction. There was no denying that something felt wrong in this room, something he couldn't quite place. Still, he kept going, not wanting to let his audience see him rattled. "All right," he said, trying to steady himself. "Let's get back to it. We're in the heart of this place now. This is where things got twisted. Just think about it. Human experimentation right here. I mean, look at this stuff." He gestured to the rusted bed frames and the forgotten medical tools scattered across the room. Who knows what they were trying to do? We may never know what went on in these walls, but one thing's for sure. It wasn't for the good of anyone. The comments were now a chaotic mess, all echoing the same thing. "Ethan, behind you! There's a figure standing right there. You can't see it, but we can. I swear, I saw a shadow move behind you. Get out of there!" Ethan's breath hitched again. He froze, staring at the screen, reading through the chat. His blood ran cold. The overwhelming sensation of being watched grew stronger. He turned around quickly, scanning the room with his flashlight, but there was nothing, just the empty space behind him. "Guys, you're seeing things." "There's no one here," Ethan said, his voice tight. "It's just the shadows. This place messes with your head. I'm telling you." But even as he said the words, doubt started creeping into his mind. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. He took another step backward, his eyes darting from corner to corner, every inch of the room feeling like it was closing in on him. Just as he turned to check the other side of the room, a sharp movement caught his eye. There, in the corner of the room, just at the edge of his flashlight's beam, was a figure. It was dark, almost human-shaped, but its outline was wrong. It seemed to shimmer, flickering in and out of existence like a distortion in the air itself. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. For a split second, he couldn't move. Then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the figure was gone. The flashlight's beam swept across the corner, but the space was empty. No, Ethan muttered under his breath, shaking his head. He spun around to face the camera, forcing a nervous chuckle. You guys are messing with me. It's just the light playing tricks. Nothing here but shadows and old furniture, right? I mean, we're in a spooky place, and of course, things are gonna look weird. But the moment he turned to check the playback on his camera feed, his stomach sank. The figure was gone from the live stream, too. No trace of it. The footage showed only the dimly lit room, with Ethan standing in the middle, looking confused and tense, but no dark figure in the corner. Okay, okay. Now this is weird, Ethan muttered, his voice shaking slightly. He clicked through the footage, rewinding it, but every time the figure was missing. He checked the angles from the other cameras, but nothing out of the ordinary appeared. The chat was going wild now. Ethan, check the playback. It was there, I swear. Bro, there was definitely something behind you. I saw it. Something's wrong. You need to leave. It's not safe anymore. Ethan's fingers trembled as he adjusted the camera. He glanced nervously around the room, his breath coming faster now. His audience's concerns were starting to echo in his mind. He wasn't sure what to believe anymore. Was it a glitch? Was he just imagining things? But the feeling of unease didn't go away. It only grew stronger with every passing second. All right, Ethan said, forcing a calmness he didn't feel into his voice. I don't know what's going on, but I'm not leaving yet. We're here for a reason. We're going all the way through this. Let's keep going. Despite his words, a sinking feeling had taken root in his gut. This place was starting to feel like more than just an abandoned asylum. It was as if something was feeding off the fear, pushing him, waiting for him to slip up. Ethan wiped his hands on his jeans, took a deep breath, and moved deeper into the room, trying to shake off the feeling that something was following him, something that was just out of sight. But with every step he took, the darkness seemed to grow thicker, and the shadows seemed to linger just a little too long. His audience watched as he continued, and Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that no matter how much he pushed forward, the thing in the corner wasn't done with him. Not by a long shot. Ethan's flashlight cast long shadows as he moved further down the hallway. The silence around him was heavy, broken only by the occasional creak of the old building. The deeper he ventured, the more the air seemed to grow colder. The overwhelming feeling that something was wrong gnawed at the edges of his mind, but he pushed it aside. The stream was going well, and his audience was glued to the screen, eagerly awaiting whatever came next. Yet, despite the excitement in the chat and the growing anticipation of his followers, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he had been walking in circles. The same peeling walls, the same rotting floorboards. It was as though every hallway, every room looked identical. He had passed the same rusted door twice now, but hadn't thought anything of it. It was just an old building, right? Maybe it was the poor lighting playing tricks on his mind. He muttered under his breath as he moved forward. This place is messing with me. Gotta stay focused. But as he pushed ahead, the sense of being lost deepened. The same hallway stretched before him again, and yet again it felt unfamiliar. The walls looked the same as they always had, cracked, crumbling, with chipped paint that peeled like old skin. But it wasn't the walls that unsettled him. It was the growing sense of disorientation. The oppressive darkness seemed to close in around him, and despite the flashlight in his hand, he felt more isolated than ever. His audience was noticing something, too. The chat was filled with messages now, all racing across the screen, far faster than he could read. Dude, you just entered the same room twice. Are you going in circles? This is getting weird. Ethan, why are there two of you? What's going on? His heart skipped a beat as he read the comments. He froze, looking around, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The old building loomed around him, silent and foreboding. He turned the camera back on himself, trying to regain his composure. All right, calm down, everyone. This place is just messing with my head, but there's no way I'm lost. I'm just exploring. But as he spoke, his voice wavered. His nerves were starting to get to him. He looked around again and saw nothing new. It was as though the asylum had become an endless labyrinth of decaying walls and broken windows, stretching far into an unknown void. He tried to focus, trying to shake off the creeping sense of panic. Then, something strange happened. Ethan glanced at the live feed and froze. His feed had split. On one side, the camera showed him walking forward, flashlight in hand, the faint light cutting through the darkness ahead. But on the other side, there was another image of him, standing completely still, staring blankly at the camera. His eyes were wide open, his expression frozen in a way that didn't feel natural. It was like looking at a lifeless mannequin. His body was still, completely unmoving, while the version of him walking down the hall continued to move. Ethan stared in disbelief at the two images. His fingers gripped the camera harder, confusion clouding his mind. He had not seen it happen. He hadn't switched feeds, hadn't done anything to split the screen. But there it was, two versions of him, one walking, one standing. The chat exploded with confusion and concern. Ethan, what's happening? Why are there two of you? Dude, what's going on? Are you messing with us? Is this some kind of prank? Because it's freaking me out. Ethan's heart began to race. He could feel the blood drain from his face as he stared at the feed. His walking version seemed real. He could hear the sound of his footsteps echoing in the silence of the asylum. But the second version of him, the one standing still, felt wrong. His body was unmoving, locked in place like a ghost, his eyes staring straight at the camera. His mouth was barely open, and his face looked strange, as if it wasn't really him. Okay, this is not right, Ethan muttered under his breath. His voice trembled slightly as he fumbled with the camera. There's got to be some kind of technical glitch, a glitch in the feed. Yeah, that's all it is. But even as he said it, he knew something was terribly wrong. No glitch had ever acted like this before. The image of the second Ethan, standing still and lifeless, was haunting. It was as if he were trapped in some twisted version of himself, locked in place while his real self walked through the halls, oblivious to the fact that he was being mirrored. Ethan quickly checked his phone for the stream's diagnostic page, his hands shaking. The stream was fine, no technical issues, no dropped frames. It was still running smoothly, except for the fact that the feed had split, showing two versions of him. Guys, listen, I don't know what's happening here, Ethan said into the camera, trying to remain calm, though his voice cracked. But I'm getting out of here. This is not a glitch. Something's wrong. He turned quickly, trying to shake the growing fear that clung to him. But as he did, the chat exploded once again, this time with more panicked messages. Ethan, look behind you. Bro, I think you're being followed. I swear, that second you, the one standing still, it moved. Ethan's eyes widened. He spun around, scanning the hallway with his flashlight. The walls stretched endlessly, but there was no sign of anyone following him. There was no one in the hallway behind him. But there was something even more disturbing. The other version of him, the one standing still, staring at the camera, wasn't just standing there anymore. It was now closer. just a few feet behind him. A cold sweat broke out across Ethan's forehead as he tried to keep his composure. "Okay, that's enough," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is too much. I'm done." But even as he said it, the second version of himself took a step forward, as if it had heard him, as if it were moving in sync with his every move. Ethan didn't wait any longer. Panic set in. The calmness that he had tried to maintain vanished completely. He turned and began running, his footsteps echoing in the hall as he darted toward what he hoped was an exit. The chat was filled with frantic comments now, everyone urging him to get out. "Ethan, hurry! It's behind you! Don't turn around!" But Ethan couldn't help himself. He glanced over his shoulder. The second version of him was right there, just behind him, walking slowly. The eyes of his mirrored self were wide and unblinking, locked on Ethan with an unsettling intensity. The figure didn't speak, didn't make a sound, but the look on its face said everything. Ethan's breath came in sharp, panicked gasps. He needed to get out of this place. He had to find an exit before it was too late. Before whatever this thing was caught up with him. But as he ran through the asylum, the hallways twisted and turned, and he couldn't remember which way he had come from. It felt like the building itself was changing, like it was alive and pushing him deeper into its heart. He had no idea where he was going, and all the while, the second version of him, the one that wasn't quite right, was still there, always a few steps behind. The chat had fallen eerily silent now, as if the viewers had all been swept into the same terrifying realization. Ethan's nightmare was only just beginning. Ethan's heart pounded as he stumbled through the decrepit asylum, each step more frantic than the last. The hallway seemed endless, twisting and turning, leading him further into a maze of darkness. Sweat poured down his forehead, his hands trembling as he gripped the camera. The faint light from his flashlight barely cut through the shadows, but it was enough to keep him moving. He had to escape. He had to get out. But the second version of himself, it was still there, behind him, always watching, always following. The reflection that was never quite right. He couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was in this place had seen through him, had seen all of him, and was closing in. As he turned a corner, he caught a glimpse of a door at the end of the hallway. A bathroom. The worn sign hanging crookedly above it seemed almost welcoming in its familiarity, a temporary refuge in the chaos. He rushed toward it, throwing open the door and stepping inside, desperate for a moment of respite. The bathroom was small and decaying, the walls stained and the floor littered with old newspapers and broken tiles. But the most striking feature was the cracked mirror above the sink. Its surface was fractured, lines running through it like spider webs. The glass was dulled by years of grime, but it still managed to reflect the faint light from Ethan's flashlight. Ethan stepped closer to the sink, his eyes flicking nervously to the cracked reflection. It was the only thing in the room that seemed to hold some semblance of normalcy. But as he looked at his own face in the mirror, something felt wrong. His reflection lagged behind. At first, Ethan thought it was just the bad lighting, or perhaps the disorienting feeling from the adrenaline that was still pumping through his veins. But as he took another step closer to the mirror, the unease grew. The reflection didn't follow his movements exactly. It seemed to hesitate as though it were a few seconds behind, mimicking him with a delayed reaction. He raised his hand to touch his face. The reflection did the same, but slower, as if struggling to catch up. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He took another step back, his mind racing. No, this isn't right. This isn't possible. He swung his flashlight around, illuminating the mirror fully. His reflection mirrored his every move, but that delay, it was growing more pronounced. His movements were being copied in the glass, but the reflection wasn't acting like him. It was almost like it was mocking him. And then it happened. His reflection smiled. Ethan froze, his eyes locking onto the mirror as the grin stretched across the face of the figure on the other side. The smile was wide, unnatural, too wide. It was the smile of something that wasn't human. But Ethan hadn't smiled. He hadn't moved his mouth. He hadn't even thought about smiling. Yet the reflection did it anyway, as though it were a living, breathing entity, fully aware of what was happening. His stomach churned. His heart raced. He could feel the sweat soaking his shirt, his legs going weak beneath him. His eyes darted from the reflection to the real world, trying to reconcile the two images, trying to make sense of the madness that had been unfolding around him. But there was no sense to be made. Nothing about this felt real. The smile in the mirror grew wider. Ethan's breathing became shallow. He took another step backward, a cold chill crawling up his spine. His body was frozen in place, his mind screaming at him to move, but his feet wouldn't obey. The reflection in the mirror didn't stop smiling. It wasn't just mimicking his expression anymore. It was alive. Then a voice, a distorted version of his own, echoed from the stream. "Don't let him leave." The words were chilling, familiar, and yet they didn't come from Ethan's mouth. The voice sounded wrong, twisted, distorted, as though it were coming from the very air around him. And it was speaking to him. To him. The warning, the command, it wasn't directed at anyone else. Ethan's stomach dropped as the realization hit him. It was him. The reflection, the thing in the mirror, wasn't a reflection at all. It was something else, something trying to take his place, trying to keep him trapped in this nightmare. The chat exploded with messages, all of them frantic, all of them warning him. "Dude, get out now! What the hell is going on? Ethan, run, now!" The messages flew by too fast for him to process. His fingers twitched, ready to grab the camera, but he was paralyzed. He couldn't take his eyes off the mirror, off the twisted smile that now stretched impossibly wide. And then, as if to confirm his worst fear, the reflection spoke. It spoke in his voice, but it was laced with a mocking tone. "You're not leaving, Ethan." The voice from the stream reverberated through the room, even though it had no clear source. It was like the walls themselves were alive, and they were trapping him inside. Ethan's breath hitched. His mind raced, trying to find a way out. The reflection, still smiling, took a step toward him. It was like it was no longer confined to the mirror. It was becoming something more, something real. He stumbled backward, finally breaking his paralysis. The flashlight in his hand shook violently as he tried to step away from the mirror, but his feet were unsteady. His chest felt tight, as if the air itself were pressing down on him. The reflection moved closer, slowly, its smile still stretched impossibly wide. "Don't leave, Ethan." Ethan's heart hammered in his chest as the mirror seemed to distort. The edges of the cracked glass warped, the reflection shifting and twisting. He couldn't tell what was real anymore. Was the thing in the mirror truly him? Or was it something else entirely, something far darker that had taken his form? The reflection reached out, its hand pressing against the cracked glass. Ethan gasped, instinctively stepping back. But as he did, the figure in the mirror didn't back off. It leaned forward, as if to come through the glass, as if it were trying to drag him in. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as he turned and bolted from the bathroom, the mirror's twisted face still haunting him in his mind. He had to get out. But no matter how fast he ran, no matter how far he went, the asylum was changing. The walls were shifting. The building itself seemed to be alive, closing in on him, keeping him trapped in its grasp. The reflection wasn't just in the mirror anymore. It was everywhere. Ethan's breath was ragged, his body pushing beyond its limits as he sprinted down the crumbling hallway. The walls seemed to stretch and contract, pulsing with an unnatural energy that made it impossible to keep track of his direction. He had been running for what felt like hours, but nothing looked familiar. No matter how hard he pushed himself forward, the asylum seemed to shift and reassemble itself, trapping him in its labyrinth. His flashlight flickered violently, casting erratic shadows that twisted and danced across the walls. It was almost as if the darkness itself was coming to life, moving around him in sync with his panicked steps. The cold air around him felt thicker, like something was pressing in from all sides, choking off any hope of escape. Suddenly, his camera feed glitched again, but this time it wasn't just a lag. The screen flickered, showing rapid flashes of someone else, wearing his face. Ethan stopped dead in his tracks, his heart skipping a beat. He tried to catch his breath, but his chest tightened as he looked at the screen. His own face, but not quite. It was his face, but it was twisted, unfamiliar. The eyes were wide, too wide. His smile, wrong. The reflection was blurry, jerking across the screen like a broken puppet. But it was unmistakably him. But it wasn't. He turned the camera toward his own face, the one he could see with his own eyes. Sweat streamed down his brow, his vision blurring as the distortion grew. Was it his mind playing tricks? Was he losing it? His head swam, and the weight of exhaustion crashed down on him. His limbs felt heavy, his movements sluggish. The pressure inside his skull was unbearable, as if something inside him was trying to break free. And then the distortion grew worse. The world around him was flickering, not just in the camera feed, but in reality. His vision doubled, then tripled. His arms felt as though they didn't belong to him anymore, as if they were someone else's. A deep, gnawing sensation twisted in his gut as his body felt foreign, like a passenger inside his own skin. His fingers twitched against the camera, but not because he was controlling them. No, the live stream, his live stream, was responding to the chat on its own. The messages from viewers kept flooding in, but Ethan wasn't typing. He wasn't even looking at the screen. It was typing for him. The chat responses were getting stranger by the second. "Is Ethan okay?" one user asked. "Why is he acting weird?" another typed, followed by a string of anxious emojis. But there were other responses too, ones that didn't make sense. "Why are you running, Ethan?" one comment read, and then another followed. "Come here, Ethan." Ethan stumbled, his mind reeling. The feed continued to glitch, but the words being typed in the chat weren't his. His hands were trembling, barely able to hold the camera. His chest tightened with dread as he felt someone else controlling the stream. The screen flickered again, and this time the image was clearer. It wasn't his face anymore. It was a perfect copy of his own, but distorted. It was like looking at a reflection in a funhouse mirror, warped and elongated. The eyes on the feed weren't his eyes. They were darker, empty. "Don't try to run, Ethan," the feed typed again. "We've been waiting for you." Ethan's mind screamed. He had to get out of here. The very thought of staying in this place any longer was unbearable. He pushed himself forward, his legs heavy, each step like wading through molasses. The hallway seemed to elongate, stretching farther than it should. Every turn he took led to more hallway. The walls grew closer, their once cracked and crumbling surfaces now pressing in on him like hands reaching out, trying to pull him in. The more he ran, the more it felt like the asylum was rearranging itself around him, trapping him in an endless loop. It wasn't just his mind playing tricks. It was the asylum itself, reshaping to fit some dark design. Suddenly, he skidded to a halt, his pulse racing as a figure appeared in the distance. It was a blurry silhouette at first, standing in the middle of the hallway. Ethan's breath caught in his throat, his blood running cold. It was him, or at least it looked like him. The figure was standing there, its face obscured in shadow, but Ethan recognized the silhouette, the way it stood, the way it moved. It was his doppelganger. Ethan's body froze, a scream dying in his throat as the figure stepped forward, its movements unnatural, jerking in time with the glitches in the feed. The camera flickered, and the shadowy figure in front of him stepped closer, its eyes glowing with an unsettling intensity, the same eyes he saw in the distorted version of himself on the screen. Ethan stumbled backward, the terror rising in his chest. His doppelganger wasn't just standing there anymore. It was watching him. It was aware of him. Its eyes locked with his as the hallway twisted behind it, contorting into an impossible darkness. The chat exploded, users in full panic mode. No, 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 no. This isn't right. Ethan, get out now. But the doppelganger didn't move. It remained eerily still, its cold eyes fixed on Ethan as if it were waiting for something, waiting for him to make a move, to make the wrong move. Without warning, it raised a hand and waved at the camera. The action was too deliberate, too smooth. Ethan's heart stopped. The figure in front of him waved exactly like he would, as if mocking him, as if toying with him. And then it spoke. Its voice was his voice, but layered with an unfamiliar distortion, like static crawling over the words. See you soon, Ethan. The doppelganger turned, its back to Ethan now, and began to walk away, stepping down the hallway like it belonged there. But Ethan didn't move. He was frozen, staring at the figure, the horrifying realization creeping up on him. The figure wasn't just mimicking him anymore. It had taken over. Ethan's feet felt rooted to the ground as he watched the doppelganger walk further into the hallway, disappearing into the darkness. He knew what was coming next. He had seen the shadow in the feed, the one that always followed him, the one that had been getting closer. The feed on the stream had gone silent, the chat messages filling up with confused and scared viewers. But in the corner of his eye, Ethan saw the shadow of the doppelganger, still moving, still following him. Only now it was moving on its own, and it wasn't stopping. Ethan turned, his legs finally working again. He bolted down the hallway, hoping, praying that there was an exit. But the walls closed in on him faster than he could run. Every door he tried to open was locked. Every corner he turned revealed more darkness. And somewhere far behind him, his doppelganger continued to walk, the feed still playing, but Ethan couldn't stop it. Because now, he wasn't sure if he was the one still watching, or if it was his doppelganger. Ethan's eyes snapped open, his body jolting awake with a gasp. He was disoriented, his heart racing in his chest as he took in his surroundings. The familiar hum of the live stream equipment buzzed in his ears, but something was wrong. The sound felt distant, hollow, like it was coming from underwater. He was still in the asylum, wasn't he? It should have been the cold, crumbling walls and the stench of decay, but this place, it felt different. A sense of unease settled over him as he looked around, his eyes scanning the room. He was lying on a cold concrete floor, staring up at the cracked ceiling, its light fixtures barely hanging on. The oppressive atmosphere he had felt before had faded, replaced with a strange, unnerving calm. Everything felt too quiet. He scrambled to his feet, disoriented, rubbing his temples. It wasn't just the stillness, it was the feeling of being trapped, like his own body didn't belong to him anymore. His eyes darted to the screen in front of him, his phone displaying the live stream interface. It was running. But it shouldn't have been. He had been inside the asylum. He had been chased. He had seen the doppelganger, the version of himself that had walked away, taken over. Ethan's mind scrambled to make sense of what was happening. But the more he looked at the phone, the more his stomach twisted. His live stream was still on, the feed still running, and yet he wasn't in control of it anymore. His phone screen showed the usual feed, a clear view of him sitting in the center of the abandoned asylum. But he wasn't controlling the camera. He was watching himself in the feed, staring back at him with a hollow expression as if it was a reflection. No, it wasn't a reflection. It was him, but it wasn't. It was the doppelganger, the one who had taken his place. No, Ethan screamed, his voice raw with panic, but the words barely registered. The chat exploded with confusion, but none of the messages seemed to make sense. They were all coming through, but none of them were directed at him. They were just there. He slammed his hand against the phone, the screen flashing with notifications, but there was no response. No one heard him. His scream, his desperate cries for help, were lost in the vast emptiness of the asylum. The feed on his phone kept running, but his doppelganger was in control. He saw himself, his face, his body, moving with an eerie calm as though everything were normal. It was walking out of the asylum now, stepping through the broken doors into the outside world, the viewership growing as the chat exploded with excitement. Ethan's hands shook as he grabbed the phone, desperately trying to stop the stream. His thumb moved frantically across the screen, but it was no use. He was no longer in control of anything. The feed wasn't his. He wasn't even sure he was still alive. He looked up at the live stream, watching himself move, watching his own movements as if they were someone else's. The comments flooded in, each one asking the same question. Where are you going, Ethan? Are you okay? Why do you look so different? His doppelganger, his own face, moved with an unsettling calm, picking up the camera, positioning it to film himself as if it were just another day, as if it were normal. Ethan's pulse raced. It wasn't just the asylum that had taken him. His life, his identity, his entire existence was being stripped away. The feed was being controlled by the doppelganger, and every moment felt more like a nightmare. Each time Ethan tried to move, he found himself in a new room, back inside the asylum, where nothing made sense. He tried running again, but every time he pushed forward, the walls closed in on him. It wasn't like before. This time, the asylum didn't just feel endless, it was endless. It kept resetting itself, a loop that refused to break. Every hallway led to another hallway. Every door led to another door. No matter how many times Ethan turned the corners, he couldn't escape. There was no exit. The asylum was alive now, in a way. It was watching him, trapping him, twisting his every move. Each time he tried to break free, it simply reset. A shift, a glitch, and he was back where he started. The flickering lights, the broken walls, the decaying furniture, it all repeated, every time he reached the same dead end. Ethan pounded his fists against the walls, his mind cracking under the pressure. He screamed again, but there was no one to hear it. The asylum, the place that had once been his worst nightmare, was now his prison. And his doppelganger, that thing was free. Living, breathing, making content as if everything were fine. The feed shifted again. Ethan's heart stopped. His doppelganger was now outside the asylum, filming himself standing on a street corner. A wide grin spread across its face, the smile too wide, too wrong. It was mocking him. Ethan's hands trembled and he glanced back at his phone. The live stream was still running, still showing the false version of himself living his life, interacting with viewers, creating new content, going through the motions of normalcy, as though it had taken his place completely. The chat was blowing up with excitement, viewers commenting on his return to the real world, praising his bravery for leaving the asylum. But Ethan wasn't there. He wasn't in control. He was stuck, trapped in this endless cycle of watching his own life slip away from him, unable to stop it. And then a new message popped up in the chat. Why don't you join us, Ethan? The words sent a shiver through his spine. He didn't know who had typed it or if anyone was truly watching him at all. But somehow, it felt like they were part of the asylum, part of the curse that kept him here. Every moment was a scream trapped in time, each second stretching into infinity. Ethan's breath hitched as he looked back at the feed, watching himself, his doppelganger, take a step forward, the world moving on without him. The street was bathed in sunlight, the world vibrant and alive, while he remained in the asylum, a forgotten prisoner in his own nightmare. He reached out, his fingers brushing the screen, desperate to reach it, to break through, but nothing changed. Every time he tried, the asylum reset, pushing him further into its grasp. His doppelganger walked away, leaving Ethan to stare at the screen, locked in a perpetual loop. And in that moment, Ethan realized that this was it. There would be no escape. His life, his future, was now nothing but a part of the endless stream, a video that would play forever. A week had passed since Ethan's last live stream, but for his viewers, it felt like no time had passed at all. His channel had gained millions of new subscribers, the live stream's eerie allure still drawing attention. But something was off. Small, unsettling changes in Ethan's demeanor began to appear in his new videos. At first, viewers didn't think much of it. Maybe it was just the pressure of being constantly in the spotlight, the exhaustion of endless content creation. But the changes were noticeable. His once engaging and charismatic tone seemed distant now, lacking the excitement he used to radiate. His eyes, once bright with enthusiasm, now appeared dull, like something inside him had shifted. The viewers began to comment on it. At first, it was just a few people, but soon the chat was flooded with the same question. Is something wrong with Ethan? Then the unexpected happened. A fan, someone who had followed Ethan's journey for years, decided to replay the final frame of his last stream. It was a long shot just to satisfy their curiosity about the strange end, but they noticed something odd. They enhanced the audio, trying to isolate the background noise, the hum of the equipment, and the static. And there, hidden beneath the faint sounds of the stream, came a whisper. A voice, soft but distinct, cutting through the chaos of the feed. He's still inside. The chat exploded with panic. The message spread like wildfire. Could it be true? Had Ethan really escaped, or was he still trapped within the asylum, still a prisoner of his own live stream? His fans were torn between fear and disbelief. Some even claimed to have seen subtle clues in the newer videos. Ethan staring at the camera for longer than usual, as if looking through it, not at it. But for most, the question remained, was Ethan gone? Was the man they saw on screen even him anymore? As the days passed, the eerie feeling only grew stronger. People who had been there from the beginning started to notice other small details. The way Ethan's smile didn't quite reach his eyes, the way his voice sounded like it was echoing from far away, as though speaking from a place that wasn't quite real. Was it possible that Ethan Carter, the man who had once been the face of horror exploration, was still trapped in the asylum? Or was the thing speaking to his fans now merely a shadow, an imitation of the person he used to be? The final message remained, he's still inside. But where? And was anyone ever going to find out?